Now, one thing I wanted to look back on Nixon's presidency is that he ushered in really kind of a new approach to the Cold War. The 1960s had seen some real close calls, um, and real friction in terms of the Cold War with with Cuba and then with Vietnam. Nixon's approach was to try to kind of lighten the relationship, to actually reach out somewhat to the communists if there was, to see if there was some kind of a common ground that could be reached. Nixon's uh, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, sorry about that, was also kind of instrumental in formulating this idea that, hey, maybe we can come to some kind of peaceful coexistence better than we have with the Cold War. And so this is kind of an ushering in and a warming of relations with the communist powers. And I say powers, it includes also China, which by this time is really emerging strongly as a tough communist nation in the world. The détente included historic trips by Nixon to China and the Soviet Union, something that hadn't happened since in the Cold War era, that you would have presidents that actually visited the communist leaders there in their homelands. And it also eventually resulted in the first arms reduction agreement between the two superpowers, where we start to scale back our nuclear arsenals. Now we still have, both sides will have plenty to pretty much demolish the world many, many times over, but at least it was a step in reducing what they'd had and kind of taking a step back and realizing, look, we came very close to nuclear war. Nuclear war is not something that would benefit either one because of the ramifications it would have, on Earth and the fallout and those kind of things. The hope was that there was, in foreign policy circles, this idea, this theory of mutually assured destruction, that we hoped both sides realized that, look, if either one was to initiate a nuclear war, it's going to be devastating for both sides and for the world in general. The Middle East really is in the spotlight also in the 1970s. The decade included various events that gained our attention. First of all, our close relationship with Israel since its reemergence as a country in the late 1940s as a Jewish homeland. After thousands of years of back from Bible times, not having control of that land and reestablishing it. And we talked about in previous units how that created real animosity in the region, which was dominated by Islam. You have the many Islamic nations in and around that area that don't appreciate this kind of Jewish presence, and that feel like the land that the Jews took over, Israel, rightfully belonged to Muslims called Palestinians that were in that what is now the country of Israel. So there was a lot of animosity, a lot of bad feelings. And how that affects us by the 1970s is we also, though we are close to Israel, have a need for oil. We are the largest oil-consuming nation of the world. We don't make enough of it ourselves. That's still true to this day. That was certainly true in the 1970s. So some of the Middle Eastern oil-producing nations, Saudi Arabia, for example, become important for us to get our oil from. And those Middle Eastern nations begin to withhold some of the oil or increase prices on that, and really affects the American market to the point where you have an energy crisis in this country. You have lines that went for blocks at gas stations. You would have, a lack of even having the gas, and not to mention its price being high, but that you would just even have a shortage and you'd have to wait on certain days and get gas. And remember, we had emerged by the after the war, really in the 1950s, as this commuter nation. We loved our cars, and now we even had, people that relied on their vehicles to get to work and those kind of things. And so it became really an issue for us. Also, if there's conflict in the Middle East, that's going to create shortages and rising prices also. And there definitely was a lot of conflict in and around that time. President Carter, who we'll see becomes president in 1976, we'll talk more specifically about how that happened in the next slide. He also makes news, makes history, really, by bringing two of the countries, Israel and Egypt, together in a historic peace agreement. And then by the end of the decade, we'll become very aware of the Middle East and Islamic fundamentalism and how that impacts us when the nation of Iran experiences a revolution where Islamic leaders become the leaders of the nation. And in 1979, after that happens, Iranian students, college students, stormed our American embassy and held American hostages for over a year. Embassies are supposed to be, sacred things, the actual, property and territory of the nation. So if there's for example, an Iranian embassy in Washington, D.C., that embassy is seen as Iranian soil. So it's not something that, even though it's in your country, that diplomatically you're supposed to respect that, and that was completely disrespected. Not only that, they took hostages from our employees who worked in that embassy. So actually, how did President Carter become President Carter in 1976? Well, Gerald Ford takes over in 74 after Nixon resigns. Remember from seeing the writing on the wall that probably was going to be impeached, maybe even removed from office. He resigns. And President Ford makes a controversial decision to give him a full pardon for any illegal acts during his presidency. So people that opposed Nixon, historians on one side will say, wait a minute, what's that? Why was he, why did Ford give him a pass? Why is he above the law? He should have, paid the price for his actions. His obstruction of justice and these kind of things that are illegal activities. And, he should have been held accountable for that. And then you have kind of the other side of the nation that says, well, this probably was a good thing that Ford saved the nation of a big public trial. We needed to move on from Watergate. It had already been a national issue and very divisive. And it just would kind of make it cleaner or whatever, that we wouldn't have to go through any kind of a public trial or any of those other kind of things after he had resigned. The nation by 76, so Gerald Ford wins the Republican nomination. He actually gets a pretty strong challenge from Ronald Reagan. We talked about him in the 60s. He had been the former famous actor in the 40s and 50s, and then had become governor of California in the 1960s. He runs against Ford for the Republican nomination. Ford wins in a close, heated battle. And so it sets up Gerald Ford versus Jimmy Carter, this new kind of considered a political outsider. I mean, he'd already been a governor of Georgia, so he wasn't really a political outsider in terms of politics, but definitely one in terms of the national or federal government. He was not only the former governor of Georgia, he had an interesting combination politically of having some progressive philosophies in the mold of an FDR or a LBJ with an evangelical Christian background. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic that Americans weren't used to. Um, Carter will win the election. America really is looking to get beyond Watergate and intrigued, I think, by Carter. And that kind of gives Ford the dubious distinction of being our only president in history to never be elected by the people. So he wasn't the first vice president, let's say, for example, Theodore Roosevelt, who becomes president because the president was assassinated. In this case, Ford becomes president because the president resigned. So he's not the first vice president to become president. But then Theodore Roosevelt, for example, went on the next term and ran on his own and won the election. Ford doesn't, and so he kind of goes down in history as one that was never elected by the people. Despite the historic success of the Camp David Agreement, that's what the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel was called. Camp David is a retreat for our American president, kind of a little vacation home that American presidents enjoy. And he had the two leaders of Egypt and Israel there, and they made a historic peace agreement. Carter, even though that's a kind of a highlight of his presidency, the low lights include a very sluggish economy. He never is. The 70s are really, really bad economically, particularly when by the time Carter gets into office, and he's just not able to reverse that. And there's this famous saying in politics, it's the economy stupid, that no matter what controversial issues Americans think are important, when it comes down to it, they tend to vote about the economy. And that ends up being bad news for Carter because he has 4 years of a pretty sluggish economy. His the final nail in his coffin, though, of not getting a second term in 1980 was the Iran hostage crisis. He just is unsuccessful in trying to get a release to the American hostages. He at one point had planned a rescue that failed. And it just made him, or gave him, the appearance of weakness. That, along with the sluggish economy, are going to be bad news for him in the 1980 election, which he will lose to Ronald Reagan, making Carter a one-term president.